Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Work in Progress. I'm your host, Joanna, and as you know, this is a space where we talk all things productivity and especially how we can maximize it. Today, we'll be chatting about exercise and how we can make more time in our lives for this really important aspect of our health, but also save time doing it. And today I'm joined by Jackson Fyfe, who is a senior lecturer in exercise science at Deakin University here in Melbourne. Hi Jackson, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great, thank you. Thanks for being with us today. Would you like to just introduce yourself with a bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Sure, yeah. So as you said, I'm a senior lecturer at Deakin University. So I work within our Institute for Physical Activity and Nutrition.
Yeah.
So part of my role is to teach mainly in our undergraduate exercise science program. So I teach mainly about exercise prescription, so how to prescribe exercise to different population groups, as well as a little bit about exercise physiology, which is how the body functions and adapts to exercise as well. So that's the teaching side. And then I also conduct research in exercise for health, particularly with a recent focus on older adults.
Yeah, amazing. And how did you know you wanted to get into exercise science?
Yeah, so I think I was always interested in how the body works. So from a young age, really loved learning about, I didn't know what it was back then in terms of anatomy and physiology, but I really just liked learning about the body systems and how they work, and was always interested in sport as well. So pretty active playing sport growing up. So towards the end of my high school studies, studied PE, and that started to lend itself a lot more to understanding how the body works during exercise. And so getting into a degree like exercise science was just a natural combination of my interest in how the body works and sport and exercise as well. So sort of took it from there.
Yeah, amazing. Just fit right in.
Yeah.
Which is great. So I think we're in great hands to talk about today's topic. But before we get into it, we've just got a few get to know, questions. So here I'm just going to ask you a few little different things and feel free to respond however you'd like to. So my first one is books. Are there any books you're reading? Any recommendations you've got?
Yeah, so I think with my reading, I normally stick to sort of the non-fiction side of things, but one book that I've kind of reread a couple of times recently, it's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and that I really liked that book because I think it really had a lot of impact on my thinking around things like exercise and really any habits that could be good or bad, and sort of how to make positive habits, how to break bad ones. So I really enjoyed that book in particular, again, because I think it's had a flow-on effect for what I do personally with various things, including exercise, but also informed how I think about the kind of research that we might do in the exercise space to hopefully impact what people do in the real world. So
yeah, amazing. And I know you said you're into non-fiction, but have you read much fictional or?
Not really. It's something that I want to do a little bit more of.
Yeah.
But no, not really. Nothing recent sort of springs to mind fiction-wise, but it is something that I do want to get into a bit more.
Yeah, that's fair. Are you into movies at all?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a massive movie buff, but I do enjoy movies. I've got two young girls. My wife and I've got two young girls. So we sort of carving out time for movies is a little bit harder these days. We tend to sort of stick more to TV series and things like that can be done in smaller chunks. But yeah, I do enjoy movies as well. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Have you guys been watching anything together?
Yeah. So what did we just finish? We just finished watching Ted Lasso,
Okay.
which was a really
Yeah.
awesome series. I think it just finished its third season, and I think it's finished now for good, which is a bit sad. But that was a really amazing show. One of those ones where kind of seems to start with a bit of a kind of abstract sort of silly idea, and really quickly, the characters draw you in, and it's quite inspiring. Like, so you kind of just feel a range of emotions when you watch sort of different episodes.
Yeah.
So we really, really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Awesome. I personally haven't watched it, but I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah.
So I'll have to add that one to the list. And we're on a podcast, so it's only fitting that I ask you if you listen to podcasts at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Tends to be what I do when I'm sort of traveling to and from work in the car.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Again, most of them tend to be kind of more, I guess, professional focused. One in particular that I listen to a lot is called The Drive, by an American physician called Peter Attia. So the focus on that is around the science of health and longevity. Breaks down various different topics that feed into that, including exercise, but also nutrition and sleep, and talks about the role that those different things can have in different disease states, and just basically how to live a longer and better life. So personally, I've found a lot of enjoyment listening to that, particularly around the benefits of exercise for health span and longevity.
Yeah, awesome. I personally have been like massively into like fictional types of podcasts, but I need to get into like more professional ones. I feel like they'd be so much more interesting and I actually learn a lot from them.
I'm kind of the opposite. I need to,
I need to diversify. So I'm working on it too. Don't worry.
Yep.
And our next one is, do you have like a famous role model? I know this question is like so tricky sometimes, or even just anyone in your life that's inspirational.
So I guess natural role models, my parents, big inspirations to me, and have allowed me to be where I am today. So I always look up to them. Others that are kind of outside of family, I guess, I've just mentioned Peter Attia. I think he's quite, I've never met him before, but follow a lot of his work, and I guess have been really inspired by his approach to improving people's health and longevity, but also his ability to communicate complex topics in a really simple way has been really inspiring to me. So I think, I tend to follow a lot of his work and got a lot of enjoyment and I guess inspiration from the work he does. So
Yeah, awesome. And I think being able to like explain really complex things simply is like so amazing, and it makes it more even enjoyable to read their work or listen to them talk about their work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. And lastly, I just want to ask you if there's any courses you've completed that are inspirational to you or you hold on to.
I'm going to sound really boring now because, again, I keep going back to work-related things. But
that's okay.
Something I did recently, which probably impacted me a lot as a researcher. You say the word statistics and people probably just stop listening. But really interesting course that I did, just a free online course on, it's called Improving Your Statistical Inferences by a Dutch researcher called Daniel Larkins, and just a free online course where he really just breaks down statistics in a really simple way, which is so important for research. I mean, that's what, we use statistical tools to be able to say what works if we're looking at an exercise intervention, what works, does it work better than other types of exercise, for example. So it's so critical to our ability to know what we know. And I think it's an area that certainly as a researcher, we don't get great training in, but it's so critical. So I think going through that course, it was one of those courses where you sort of do it and you think, I wish I had access to this, years ago.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was sort of online and free was just amazing. So that had a lot of impact on me professionally.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think free resources, especially when it comes to learning, should be so much more accessible. Yeah. So that's amazing. And I think before we jump into the questions, I thought we could do like a little get an interesting fact from you, because I've been looking through at some of like the work you've done, and like I noticed that there's a lot of myths and so many different perceptions about exercising, and there's so much content being made on like social media about do this or do that. Is there anything that you would like to debunk, or there's like a common misconception about exercising?
There's so many, I guess. Probably the main thing that feeds into a lot of the work I've been doing more recently is that a lot of people think that for exercise to be beneficial, it's got to be, quite complex and also time consuming.
Yeah.
So, the idea that you have to really, work very hard during exercise and you have to really sweat it out for there to be benefits. I think that's a really big misconception that probably prevents a lot of people from exercising in the first place, let alone exercising regularly.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the main one that I can think of right now. There's like tons of myths around resistance or strength training.
Yeah.
That tends to be my sort of focus is, or a lot of my expertise is around resistance or strength training. So there's tons of myths there. The idea that if you strength train a certain body part that you'll kind of, lose body fat in that specific area.
Yeah.
So this idea of toning or spot reduction is a myth. Those sort of things, some people are not interested in strength training because they think that if they do it within, overnight, they're going to turn into a bodybuilder and they're looking bulky and that sort of thing. So we know that that's simply not the case. It takes many, many weeks and months for that to occur. So, I think it's just, a lot of people have these sort of misconstrued expectations about exercise, either what it requires to get a benefit or what sort of benefits should they expect. And I think that both of those are really common barriers to engaging in regular exercise.
Yeah, definitely. And I personally been curious about this, but does DOMS is that a proper indicator that you've been working out effectively?
So that is a big misconception as well. And, you're right. A lot of people will use that as kind of a marker of whether, they've had a good exercise session or not. If they don't feel any soreness or fatigue in their muscles, they kind of think, I didn't really work hard enough, to get a benefit. But that's certainly not the case. So we know that muscle damage tends to really happen when you're unaccustomed to exercise. So when you first start exercising, if you do something new, particularly any exercise that involves what we call eccentric contraction, so when the muscles are lengthening under load, which is, for example, when you're lowering a weight, your muscle is contracting, but it's lengthening.
Yeah.
And we know exercise that involves those eccentric actions, running is another example where you are sort of, lowering or controlling your body weight when you land. Those types of exercise tend to cause muscle damage, which causes muscle soreness. And again, it tends to really happen mainly when you are unaccustomed to that type of exercise. So when you first start the exercise program, you'll get quite sore, and then you keep doing it, and over time you'll get less and less sore to the point where you don't really get sore anymore unless you introduce something new.
Yeah.
So that doesn't match up with the way we know that changes or adaptations to exercise work, is that they progressively, generally increase over time, whereas the opposite's happening with soreness. So that tells you that it's not really related to soreness. It doesn't really tell us a lot about the changes that we get long term.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think a lot of people, even myself, I would think I have to go to the gym, and if I don't feel the pain, that nothing's actually happening. So I think it's good to get that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So let's get straight into these interview questions. So my first one for you is, over the course of your experience, how would you personally define personal productivity?
Yeah, so I think for me, and I guess, it's highly individual, I guess. I think a lot of this comes back to what, you value. And I guess for me, if we think about productivity work-wise, I think it's all about, for me at least, working on projects and things that I'm passionate about. And, ensuring that I'm spending my time being quite focused on those projects, not doing a lot of things that don't align with, what I really want to achieve. So it's, really being able to spend focused time on the things that I want to work-wise, which in turn then allows more time and energy for other things in life that I value as well. So if that's family, social time, and also just having time to, look after yourself with exercise and things like that. So I think, Yeah, I think it's really around, it comes down to sort of, being efficient, knowing what's important to you, being efficient at achieving that, and allowing yourself to have a range of experiences across different domains that you find fulfilling as well. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like productivity is so like multifaceted as well, and it's
Yeah.
very individual to that person and what they define productivity as. So that's really great. And do you think that there is anything that people get wrong when it comes to personal productivity and what it is?
Yeah, probably the main thing I'd say would be maybe, again, it is highly individual, but a lot of people may be associating productivity a little bit too much with what they do for work, maybe. So pouring all their energy into that, and perhaps neglecting other areas of their life as well that they may value. So that's probably the main thing. And probably the other major thing would be equating time on task or time in the office with productivity rather than actually, quality work. Again, from a professional standpoint, I think that's probably another major thing where people get it wrong. Yeah,
for sure. Like the whole quality over quantity thing applies here, I reckon. Yeah, for sure. And I'd like to kind of combine the exercising part of this now. So how would you define efficient exercising? I know we like touched a bit on it with like debunking those misconceptions, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think if we're being efficient with our exercise, we're doing enough to get a benefit in terms of what we are, what we're wanting to get out of exercise. I guess people can have a range of reasons why they might engage in exercise. Obviously, there's general health benefits, but people might have specific goals they're working towards as well. So I think part of it is just ensuring that we're doing enough to work towards those goals, but we're not, again, kind of overstepping that mark that we're spending too much time doing it, and then it's kind of interfering with other areas of life. Or if it gets too onerous, then it becomes not feasible anymore, and then we sort of revert to doing nothing. So I think sort of finding that middle ground between we don't want to be doing nothing, but we also don't want to be doing too much. It's probably not a problem that a lot of people have, but too much that then it's not sustainable, and it's also then interfering with perhaps other things that we might want to spend time on in life as well, if that's family or friends or whatever that might be. So
yeah, and like how would people go about like striking that balance? Would it be something like trial and error?
Yeah, I think we just need to find, each person needs to kind of find what is feasible for them, what works for them. So, just trying to, again, find types of exercise that you enjoy, first and foremost, but trying to see, what is something that they could stick to quite regularly in their schedule, and just focusing on doing that. I think a lot of benefits of exercise just come from consistency. So engaging in some form of exercise on a regular basis rather than focusing too much on trying to do the perfect program or whatever it might be. So I think it's just, doing enough so that you're doing something, you're not doing nothing, and you're doing that quite regularly. And then the next challenge is sticking to that long enough to actually see the benefits. Because for a lot of people, the benefits a lot of people want out of exercise don't happen that quickly. So the challenge is sort of, just sticking to it long enough to be able to then see those benefits, and then you're getting that feedback, oh, actually what I'm doing is working.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other short-term benefits as well that people can kind of tap into that kind of keep you on that path that probably a lot of people aren't aware of or don't focus on when it comes to exercise. So there's probably a few different ways there.
Yeah, so really like committing to what you're doing if you want to see those long-term results.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to just focusing on the process instead of the outcome. So we need long-term goals to, set direction, but a lot of people just kind of set those goals and don't really identify the steps they need to put in place to go towards those goals, and don't put systems in place to keep them on that path. So, if you have a long-term goal to, improve your muscle mass or, improve your aerobic fitness or whatever it might be, to get to where you want, that could be, 6 months, 12 months more down the track. So a lot of people sort of set those goals and just think, oh, I'm just going to keep training towards that. But for a lot of people, it's quite hard because obviously it's a long-term thing, and then, it requires you to keep training regularly. And if we're not focusing on ways to just kind of keep showing up for our exercise sessions, then it can kind of lead us astray a little bit, I think. So
yeah, for sure. And do you think social media plays a role in this? Because I know I come across so many videos that are like 5-minute abs, like do this once a day for a week to get abs kind of thing. Do you think that contributes to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it could lead to people believing that they are going to get results a lot quicker than they in reality they will. And the other thing as well is it can also maybe give people unrealistic expectations of what exercise should or needs to be effective. So they might see people who are, they're quite fit in various different ways, and they might be seeing how they train and think, well, that's the only way that I'm going to get, anywhere close to that is by training like they will. And I think that's another area where people get it wrong as well, is that they try and do too much too quickly. Again, it just becomes unsustainable, or things like injuries and things happen, and it sort of forces them to stop or sort of pick it back. But yeah, I think for the most part, social media isn't great for setting good expectations with regards to exercise.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of an unhealthy exercise culture that is being built there. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And how would you say efficient exercising influences personal productivity?
Yeah, I think it comes back to time management for me, I guess. If we are being efficient with exercise, we're more likely to do it because we're not having to devote as much time to it. And then if we're not devoting as much time to it, we've got more time for other areas, again, that might feed into productivity or, getting fulfillment in different areas as well. So I think that's certainly from my perspective, the way I look at it as well. I like to exercise regularly, but I don't really like to spend more time than I have to, because I know that then that's going to take away from other things as well. So yeah, that's probably how I would look at it.
Yeah, amazing. And I'd love to talk about physical inactivity, because I know you've looked a bit at this. What do you think makes it difficult for people to maintain exercising and maintaining time for it?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of different factors. The most cited barrier to exercise is always lack of time. Whether or not that's actually the case is another thing. That's what most people say when they're asked, why don't you exercise, or what's getting in the way of you exercising. Often they'll say it's a lack of time. But in reality, we know that people have a lot more leisure time available to them than they need for exercise. They're just choosing to spend it on different things for the most part. So I think that's sort of one of the main barriers in terms of why people don't kind of engage in exercise and do it regularly. There's a whole host of other things as well. That perception that, exercise needs to be really challenging and painful to be effective. Like if I'm not crawling out the gym and don't have those sore muscles and feel really fatigued, well, I wasted my time. It's just simply not the case. So I think that a lot of those misconceptions about what we need to do for exercise to work is getting in the way of people just doing it regularly. So I think the answer to that a lot of the time is just to simplify down what we're doing and really just focus on trying to be a little bit more consistent and regular with exercise, even if it's a ridiculously small amount of exercise. If we just establish a base of being consistent and, just keep showing up, I think that goes a long way to getting people towards the long-term goals that they might be looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And are there any strategies that people might be able to use to help them, make time for even the smallest bit of exercise?
Yeah, look, I think this is where I mentioned the book Atomic Habits earlier. I think, if we think about exercise like a habit, like we want to, in an ideal world, we want to make physical activity exercise as something that is habitual, that's automatic, that we don't really need to think about all that much. It's just something that we do. It's part of what we do. There definitely are some strategies that we can use to kind of make exercise a little bit more, a little bit easier, a little bit more attractive, and, so that we want to exercise a little bit more rewarding. So, it could be just simple things like, again, if we're setting our expectations quite low in terms of what we're going to do with exercise, so if we just condense it down to, even if it's something like a 5 or 10 minute bout of exercise, it could be like, going for a walk around the block or walking to the end of the street and back, something simple like that. I think that immediately, removes that time barrier. It makes it easier for people to go from just doing nothing to then the decision between doing nothing to doing something is much easier. So there's even things like that. There's things like putting cues in your environment to make exercise a bit more obvious. So it could be something as simple as, if you intend to exercise the next morning, just leaving your gym clothes out, somewhere where you'll see them.
Yeah.
Leaving your running shoes out so that when you get home, you'd see them, you put your running shoes on and you go for a walk or run or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So things like that, making things a little bit more obvious, just making it easier. So you're sort of removing that friction of having to make that decision to exercise and putting less barriers in between, barriers between what you're doing and making that decision to exercise.
Yeah, for sure. And how can we make time for this without having to sacrifice like other responsibilities in our life?
I think a big part of this is just being really deliberate about scheduling time. A lot of people might just say, look, today I want to try and go to the gym or want to go for a walk, but they just kind of go through their day and sort of think, I've got a rough idea of when I might do it, but I'll just get it done, and then things get in the way. So I think actually, this is sort of the approach I use. If I've got my calendar where I've got different things that I'm working on during the day, I will deliberately block out time at some stage in the day to exercise, on sort of most days of the week, so that, if I stick to my tasks during the other times that I've allocated time for, then, I've got that time there. I've protected it and I've said I'm going to do it. So you kind of, by scheduling it, you're kind of telling yourself that you will do it in that time. And again, through some of those other strategies around just, simplifying exercise, it just makes it, I think, a little bit easier to actually, get it done. So.
Yeah, for sure. And along the lines of like fitting in time in your schedule for that, do you have any like strategies you could share with people for how to make like an exercise plan, or one that like works for them and the time they've got available?
I think if we're talking, exercise plans, it probably comes down to, their goals to a certain extent. Although I do think that, for most people, doing any form of activity, whether that's just walking or if it is going to the gym, lifting weights, that sort of thing, doing anything is going to be beneficial. So I think for most people, just finding some sort of exercise that they think they could do regularly and they enjoy.
Yeah,
I think that's the main thing. It shouldn't be about doing something, a type of exercise because someone told you that it's, good for improving your strength or good for some other long-term benefit. It should be really because, you can do it, you feel like you can do it, you enjoy it. Because if you don't, then I think it's very hard to stick to in the long term. So, there certainly are benefits to different types and forms of exercise and different exercise programs, for sure. But there's also a lot of overlap between different types of exercise, particularly in people that aren't exercising very regularly. If you're talking about, the 1% of the population, the elite athletes, then clearly they're very, very focused on very specific training for specific goals. But for most other people, for general health benefits, there is a lot of crossover between different types of exercise. So again, I think it just comes down to finding whatever you think that you could do quite regularly and starting there and just focusing on trying to do that quite regularly, even if it seems like it's something that, is, you're not getting a sweat up, you're not feeling sore, you're like, is this really going to do anything? But I think once you do stick to that, it sets the foundations. It makes you, consistent in terms of, being able to exercise regularly, whatever that might be. But it also just sets that foundation that once you establish that, you can always, do more if you want. Try different types of exercise that might give you slightly different benefits. But you can have the best program in the world, but if you can't stick to it and you don't do it long term, it just doesn't work. So
yeah, for sure. So would you place more emphasis on doing a type of exercise that you enjoy over like prioritizing goals and then doing exercises that you don't enjoy?
Yeah, I think so. I think goals are important because I do think that people need to have their why in mind. So, thinking of goals that, really tap into, their sense of purpose or, having some broader reason for why they might want to improve their health or fitness. That could be, something like, thinking about the types of things you want to do in your later years. If you think about your last decade of life, for example, what sort of physical tasks would you want to be able to do? Again, Peter Attia has a great sort of framework for this. He calls it the centenarian decathlon. So he thinks about and gets his patients to think about a list of 10 activities that they would like to be able to do, not necessarily when they're 100, but maybe in their last decade of life. So it could be, pick up a young child who's running at you. It could be carrying groceries, for 3 blocks or whatever. It could be walking up a set of stairs, getting up off the floor without support. So thinking about those tasks and then thinking about exercises that you could do that kind of mimic those tasks, setting goals around, okay, if I'm going to be able to pick up a young child who's 15 kilograms when I'm 90, if I know that I'm going to naturally lose strength as I get older, when I'm 80, I need to be able to lift, a certain amount, a little bit heavier than that, 20 kilos, when I'm 80 and so on, working backwards from there to kind of set. So it sort of gets people to think, okay, I'm exercising not just because I know it's good for me, but because it's going to help me, have a better quality of life and allow me to do the things that are important to me when I'm older. So I guess that's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's one way where long-term goals can be important. But as I said before, I think a lot of people get sometimes a bit too focused on long-term goals and but neglecting the short-term kind of, I guess, that path towards those goals. They're sort of, because the reality is a lot of those long-term goals, they are long-term. So a lot of the benefits in relation to those goals aren't seen for a long time. So for a lot of people, if they're making a decision between sitting on the couch and going to exercise, often that discrepancy between the effort required to exercise or the perceived effort and, how long they'll have to do that to get their benefit, often that balances out for a lot of people and that really prevents them from exercising. So
yeah, for sure. And just in terms of like when people go to do these exercises, how do they know they should commit to it and that they will see the results that they want to see? Or is there a point in time that they should stop?
I think, I think the main message is that any activity is beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that when it comes to health benefits of exercise, the greatest benefits that we see in terms of how much exercise, we see the greatest benefits when people go from doing nothing to something. That is when the greatest benefits occur. Beyond that, there are, benefits up until a certain point in terms of a dose or amount of exercise people are doing, but it's the greatest benefits are going from nothing to something. So I think, again, for most people, given that most people don't meet exercise guidelines, which doesn't necessarily mean they're not doing anything, but I think for most people, just going from nothing to something is going to get them a lot of the benefits, and that's not really a sexy message, and it's not do this optimal exercise program and you'll get X benefit in X amount of weeks. But I think in reality, it's just getting people to do something. And I think if we start saying, look, this is what program you should follow for these benefits, I think it just makes exercise a little bit harder for people.
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, look, just move, just find something that you enjoy. It doesn't really matter what it is. Try and stick to it with some other strategies that you can put in place. And then, sure, over time, if you want to, do more or do something different, you can do that. But unless you have that sort of foundation of consistent, regular exercise, it is harder to see those long-term benefits.
Yeah, for sure. I think finding something you enjoy and like being able to see that as like why you're doing it as well is important. Yeah. And what are like the health benefits? What are maybe like top 3?
Oh, top 3. Yeah, look, there's very wide ranging benefits of exercise. If we think about reducing our risk of chronic disease, so some decent evidence that long-term exercise reduces the risk of various chronic diseases. If you're thinking about cardiovascular disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, obesity, these sorts of conditions that can have a really big impact on quality of life. And what we're finding more and more, and it used to be the case that people sort of associated aerobic type exercise, running, swimming, cycling, walking, with a lot of the, having a lot of the benefits for those sort of chronic disease conditions. Whereas sort of resistance or strength training was kind of seen as something that people just do if they just want to get stronger and grow some muscle. But actually what we're seeing is that there's a really large crossover in the benefits of different types of exercise, including aerobic and strength training or lifting weights in sort of reducing risk of those chronic diseases. So even something like strength training can have really large benefits for those types of chronic diseases. So I guess, reducing risk of chronic disease when it comes to particularly resistance exercise, improvements in physical function. If we're looking at older adults, we know that, from the age of, really from the age of 30 onwards, we're starting to actually hit our sort of peak muscle mass and strength. And then certainly from 40 or 50 onwards, we're starting to see a progressive loss of not only muscle mass, but strength and also what we call power, so our ability to move quickly. Those things are decreasing. So, particularly resistance exercise has a positive effect on offsetting those losses. And we know those things are really strong predictors of people's independence, their risk of dying early, other adverse events like falls and fractures, those sorts of things. So that's a really another, big benefit of exercise as well. So I think you're just reducing chronic disease risk, improving physical function, mobility, and also there's some pretty considerable mental health benefits as well that that seem to be caused by or benefited by aerobic and resistance exercise as well. So again, really big crossover. But there's the physical benefits and also those sort of mental health, cognitive type benefits as well.
Yeah, awesome. And total hypothetical, but if someone were to, decide that gym's their thing, they want to start going to the gym and do like strength training, how would they go about like this idea of reps and sets and figuring out what works for them?
Yeah. So I guess to break it down, so when you want to do some resistance or strength training, I guess the first thing you've got to think about is, what exercises am I going to do? And then when you're doing those exercises, as you said, typically you're doing them for a number of repetitions, and then a set of repetitions would then form a set. So they're kind of like, the three main, I guess, variables in terms of strength training. In terms of exercise selection, I think, people can think about exercises as different types of movements rather than different exercises. So, for example, you can have there's various exercises that would be considered upper body pushing type exercises, something like a bench press or a shoulder press or something like that. So those exercises tend to work sort of your chest and shoulders and triceps. You can have upper body pulling exercises like a lat pull down, seated row, and then you can have sort of push and pull type exercises for the lower body as well. So I think choosing what exercises to do, I think it's good to kind of have a spread of exercises across those sort of major movement patterns, and that means you're kind of training most of your major muscle groups. Really, you can train most major muscle groups with just 3 exercises. So if you choose one upper body push, one upper body pull, and then even one lower body, you're going to hit most major muscle groups.
Okay.
So you talk about efficient training in the gym. That's one way, is just choosing exercises that train a lot of muscle groups at once, and they tend to be those multi-joint exercises that involve movement at more than one joint. So, for example, with the upper body push, you've got the shoulder and your elbow moving, which means that any muscles crossing those joints are going to be involved, as opposed to just doing a single joint exercise like a tricep push down. movement at one joint, only engaging the triceps as opposed to not involving the pecs and the shoulders. So choosing multi-joint exercises, spreading them across those sort of 3 or 4 main movement patterns, you're going to hit most major muscle groups. So that's sort of the first thing. It's like, what do I do for exercises? And then, it's like, all right, I'm going to lift a weight. How many reps? I think, look, anywhere between sort of, 6 to 20 or more repetitions is going to be fine. Again, I think someone just starting out should just worry about, choosing a weight that they could lift somewhere between 6 to 20 times or so, and focus on doing it with good technique. That's going to get them considerable benefit if they keep doing that long term. And even as little as one set can have benefits. There's plenty of studies showing that even training with single sets of exercises can improve strength. So I think it's kind of, just choosing a weight, lifting for a certain number of repetitions. Over time, if we want to focus more on getting stronger, we do need to try and lift heavier weights and that means sort of less repetitions. So you might be closer to that 6 rep range, trying to lift a bit heavier once we've established a good base of solid technique and those kind of things. We know for muscle mass or muscle growth, rep range doesn't really matter all that much. We used to think that you had to kind of train between 8 to 15 reps to get optimal muscle growth, but we know that muscle can grow with rep ranges anywhere between 6 to 20, even 30 reps per set. But we do know that when we're lifting weights and we're wanting to grow muscle, we do need to be taking our sets a little bit closer to the point of what we call momentary muscular failure, which is if you're lifting a weight, you can only do it for a certain number of repetitions until you can't lift that weight again for another rep. So that's called the point of failure.
Okay.
It's very uncomfortable to get to that point. But for muscle growth and to kind of get engagement from most of the muscle fibers that you're training, you do need to kind of eventually train close to that point. And again, we're talking a little bit more advanced there. A bit of a long-winded answer, but I think, look, as simple as, doing 3 exercises, 6 to 20 reps, somewhere in that vicinity, and also even as little as 1 set, people are going to get benefit.
Okay, awesome. And do you recommend any resources people can go to if they're looking for push, pull, or lower body exercises?
Yeah, good question. And look, there is a lot of information online, but the quality of that does vary quite a bit. In terms of, I think Exercise and Sport Science Australia, so that's our governing body, I think if you jump onto their website, they do, I believe, have some resources around perhaps different types of exercises that one could do from a strength training perspective. But there is lots of information on there. I think for people mainly just interested in, I want to know an exercise that does train, the back or my quadriceps or thigh muscles or something like that. I think just jumping on a Google search, most people can find decent information if it's just talking about what exercises are targeting different muscle groups.
Yeah, awesome. And lastly, do you think efficient exercising can improve our time management skills?
Look, I think exercise does have benefits. I think that do flow onto productivity in other areas. So if you think about exercise, some of the short-term benefits of exercise being, just improvements in mood and reductions in anxiety, those sort of things that are, in the short term, I think that could have flow-on effects to being productive in other areas as well. So for example, if you've got a busy day, often you think, I don't have time to exercise. But then if you can manage to find time early in the day to do it, you'll probably find that your day might be a little bit less stressful, because you've got those sort of benefits of improvements in mood and those other sort of cognitive type mental health benefits as well. And also I think it's just nice to know that you have dedicated time to something that is important for your health as well. So I certainly find that as well. I think if I don't schedule time for whatever reason and I'm then getting quite busy with other things, it's quite frustrating because you feel like you're not always able to do things that are positive for your health. So I think absolutely it would have benefits in other areas if you can find time to do regular exercise.
Yeah, awesome. And I'd love to move into our practices debrief section. So here we're basically just going to ask you how you apply this in your own life. So is there like a practice you do to improve efficient exercising?
I think a lot of it's just really what I've been talking about. I think I used to be someone like, having gone through exercise science, we learned a lot about, how to design exercise programs to achieve, a certain benefit, like getting stronger, getting fitter, that kind of thing. And kind of, you practice writing programs and you kind of get really focused on trying to do that in the best way. So I've sort of been guilty of trying to focus a little bit more on, in the past, doing the perfect program, but more and more what's really helped with me being able to exercise a lot more consistently is, again, just trying to simplify things, is sort of forgetting about what is, perfect, because in reality there's no perfect exercise program. The perfect one is the one that you can do more regularly and consistently over the long term. So I think that's really helped me, just sort of simplifying things, setting expectations really low, that mindset that something's always better than nothing, just, I guess, trusting in the process, because a lot of the time, countless times I'll go to the gym and there'll be people training, and almost always most people are still there when I leave. I don't spend a lot of time. And I think initially it's like you sort of almost need to convince yourself that if I just stick to this, it's going to work.
Yeah.
For a lot of people probably don't think, this is just a waste of time.
Yeah.
But so it's just trusting in that process. And then I think you find, and then once you start seeing the benefits, then you just reinforces, okay, this is working, but there's a delay there. So
yeah,
I think there's that. Again, other things I've already talked about, like trying to focus a bit more on those short-term benefits. So not saying, I need to go to the gym because, I want to try and get a bit stronger or whatever. It's like, no, I want to go to the gym because I think I'm going to feel better.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So you get that benefit instantly, and it's like, I don't really care long term. I just want to feel better. You just want to have that sort of energy boost.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there are a few strategies that I've used that have helped me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think based on what you said, there's a lot of benefits for like your mental health and like how you approach exercise and building more of like a positive sort of idea around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really great. Do you have like a favorite way you like to exercise?
Yeah, look, I tend to, most of my exercise is in the gym. So during COVID though, I mean, really since I did sort of my undergraduate studies, I've been, relatively consistently exercising in the gym, lifting weights. That's sort of my primary exercise that I'll do. So I try and do that, 3 or 4 times a week, and then just sort of, fitting in some general aerobic type activities around it if I can, but that might be sort of once or twice a week. But then there's also just that incidental activity as well, just trying to kind of, we always think of, the word exercise is, and in reality it does mean like structured exercise, something that you've kind of set aside to do and it's got some sort of structure to it, whereas I guess physical activity is a little bit more just general movement. But I think a lot of that incidental physical activity people often neglect. They don't think about that as being a contributor to their health. So I think, wherever possible, just trying to find those opportunities to move, to be active, those sort of things as well. I can't remember if that answers your question.
No, it does for sure. Yeah. And it also leads into me asking you about like challenges. Do you face any challenges when it comes to sticking to going to the gym?
Yeah, I think the main, just I guess convincing yourself that what you're doing is going to be effective if you keep going. Like, as I said, sometimes, because it's such a long-term thing, like there's some benefits that you don't see straight away. So it's just convincing yourself that, this is positive. That's where I think focusing on those short-term benefits is good as well. I think the other thing is just, having those realistic expectations. So just not expecting things to change too quickly. If it's looking at, something that's a health or fitness goal, for example. And I think that certainly helps to kind of keep you, I think if you do have, expectations that are a little bit too high in terms of, I'm going to achieve certain benefit in a certain period of time, for example. We talked about how social media can play into that as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a big reason for dropout, when people, don't get the benefits that they're looking for, think, look, it's too much effort for too little benefit. That's when they tend to stop, I think, a lot of the time. So I'd say that's where probably people go wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And do you normally make time or like certain times to do this practice in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely always try and schedule time somewhere in the calendar to do it, so that, because not only then are you allocating time to do that, you're also, making sure that everything else you got to do is not, interfering, and you have to be realistic then, because that's why I like using a calendar-based system personally, because I need to know, all right, this is how I plan to spend my time during the day. And often, let's say you go to schedule an exercise session in, and you're like, well, where's this going to fit? But then it comes down to priorities, I guess. Like a lot of the time I'll do that and I'll be like, no, I need to exercise. So is there something in my day that I can move to another day? So it's then, so you're just being realistic, I guess, about your time. And part of it, is about working on things that you are, that is a priority. And if that's something that, if exercise falls into that, I guess you just have to be diligent about making sure you schedule time. And then if there's other things that are less important or can wait to another day or next week, just moving them and not letting those things that are less important get in the way of something like exercise.
Yeah, for sure. And do you find that, making time and prioritizing exercise in your schedule has helped your personal productivity?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Yeah, just generally, I think I feel better. I just feel more productive, more energetic when I'm exercising regularly. So absolutely, I think it definitely does flow into other areas of life. I also think it's amazing how many kind of ideas for different, research projects or different ways to kind of, teach a certain concept in my classes that occur to me when I'm exercising.
Yeah.
Like I'm often just going for a walk or in the gym, and then I'll just have this idea just randomly pop in my head. So it's sort of, I don't know, it just has benefits, I think, for, definitely for productivity in other areas, just from, feeling better. And then, just those kind of ideas popping up as you're doing it. So, absolutely.
Yeah. So like a really great way to even just have some time to think and time for yourself.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like often you're working on something, say, and you're like, oh, I can't take a break now because I just need to get this done. But it's amazing sometimes when you step away and you maybe, go for a walk or something like that, it does then stimulate sort of ideas and just gives you that energy boost. So then when you come back, so it's kind of like a bit of a paradox. Like you don't want to carve time out for exercise because you might be thinking, I need to be productive on this task. But then if you don't do that, then your productivity probably suffers anyway, like because you don't get those benefits from the exercise. So I think, that's something that I've found to be quite helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great way to think about it and just another added benefit. So that's awesome. I've got some questions from our audience for you now.
Yep.
And I really love this question actually. So for individuals with limited mobility or physical constraints, what are some alternative ways to engage in physical activity?
Yeah, so I think there's certainly various options for people to still be active if they do have mobility limitations, and I guess it depends on what those limitations are, but certainly exercising different body parts. If we do have mobility limitations of the lower body, for example, trying to find types of activity that could work the upper body. So certainly there's some, aerobic type options that we can use to work the upper body. If it's, something like boxing, or there's even sort of arm cranking type exercise. When it comes to resistance training, we can, target various different types of the areas of the body with different exercises. So I think there's certainly options there, depending on, individual constraints and in terms of their movement. Absolutely.
Yeah. And do they provide similar health benefits to people who probably don't have any physical or mobility constraints?
Yeah, I think so. I think exercise can have wide-ranging benefits no matter, if you have any sort of mobility limitations or not. In certain instances, if there are mobility limitations, if we're thinking about, for example, older adults who might have trouble with movement and sort of daily activities, we know that exercise can help those positively as well, just by improving their strength and their general physical function. So I think absolutely, again, any movement is good movement. So just moving in whatever way we can, I think is positive overall.
Yeah, amazing. And my next question is, are there any tools, apps, or resources available that can help streamline and optimize like an exercise routine to save time?
Resources. The top of my head, look, there's a lot of information, online about exercise, as you know, but often sifting through a lot of it can be quite challenging. I think certainly if we're looking for exercise-related information, if we are searching for it online, looking for stuff that's published by reputable governing bodies like Exercise and Sport Science Australia, or ESSA, ESSA. So they have a lot of exercise resources and guidelines. I think Exercise Right might be another one that might have some good resources online. So there are a couple of websites there that people can go to find information. If other people are looking for support around exercise, a little bit more guidance, we do have professionals called accredited exercise physiologists now, who are master's degree qualified professionals who specialise in exercise prescription for not only people who have no health concerns, but also people with chronic diseases as well, if that's hypertension, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, etc. as well. And they're also qualified to prescribe exercise for people who have injuries or who are recovering from injuries, etc. So certainly, getting a consultation with an AEP or accredited exercise physiologist is a really good way to get high quality support when it comes to exercise.
Yeah, awesome. And I just had a question that popped into my head just then. So a question from me. In terms of like personal trainers, do you believe they are like another option or a resource that can help people save time and be more productive while they exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who does have some education in exercise, an exercise prescription can certainly help. So look, that's the other thing as well, is that aside from the kind of, I guess, education and help with what to do, there's also just that, I guess, social support that a lot of people, that helps a lot of people. So that's something else that can get people more engaged with exercise if they've got someone there helping them, showing them through a program. So that could be someone like a personal trainer or an accredited exercise physiologist. So that can help people be regular with their exercise. And also just, some people might just benefit from having like an exercise buddy or exercising in groups. A lot of people, like doing that as well. Some people don't.
Yeah.
So for some people that can be a barrier. If they might not want to go to a gym or, exercise around a lot of people, they might prefer to do it at home. So again, it's just finding, what they like and what's going to be, more likely for them to keep doing that regularly, whether it's doing it alone or in a group, or supported by someone like a personal trainer. Yeah, absolutely, they can help find ways for people to exercise more efficiently, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how there's so many different options out there for exercising, which makes it so much more accessible now as well. Yeah. So there's really no excuse why you shouldn't. So I'm glad we're sort of debunking all these different things and giving people no excuse as to why they can't exercise. So that's really great. And my last question for you is multitasking like a common approach in saving time with exercise? So can we incorporate exercise into our daily lives or activities as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been a lot of work recently looking at individuals who, as part of their work, so for example, office workers who spend a lot of their time sitting at their desk. A lot of research, including some researchers at Deakin University, where I'm from, who look at the idea of kind of snacking on short bouts of activity during a work day. So, so could be every hour or so, next to the desk doing some, body weight exercises for, even a minute or something like that. So kind of breaking up that sedentary behavior across the day with some short snacking bouts of exercise. And they've actually found that's had some quite positive effects on what we call metabolic health. So looking at blood glucose levels and those kinds of measures. So I think that can certainly have benefits. And also, there's a lot being done now on the idea of breaking up exercise into smaller bouts. Instead of doing sort of 3 longer sessions a week, can you break that up into, daily short bouts of 10 minutes or something like that? And that research is actually finding that can be quite effective as well. So, there's evidence that bouts of what we call moderate to vigorous physical activity, so anything that kind of, really raises your heart rate a little bit, gets you breathing a little bit to the point where your breathing rate is increased, but you can still maintain a conversation, so nothing too vigorous or intense. Bouts of as little as 5 minutes can have benefits for health.
Okay.
So, and that has kind of fed into a lot of the messaging around physical activity guidelines now, is, saying that, the guideline is to do sort of, 150 minutes or more a week of moderate to vigorous physical activity, but there's no sort of requirement for that each session that you do to be a certain length. It's like you can accumulate that time however is feasible for you. So if that's just breaking it up into 5 or 10 minute sessions throughout your day or whatever it is, then that can still be quite effective as well. So so that's some of the work that we've been doing recently as well with older adults, looking at just doing some body weight strength type exercises and doing it in really short bouts. So 9 to 10 minute bouts of exercise, where they might do 5 exercises, do them each for a minute. So just do sort of as many reps as they can comfortably in that minute, rest for a minute, go to the next exercise. So we call those sort of resistance exercise snacks. And we've found in some of our research that, older adults can do those up to 3 times a day, feasibly for, only a relatively short period. I think we had it was a 4-week study we did recently, where they, could engage in that frequently. So they found it, and a lot of people, commented that they found that made it easier to integrate exercise into their day if they knew they could sort of spread it into separate bouts of exercise. So absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And the more we talk, the more I'm realizing how flexible this idea of like exercising is. And like you really can save time because you can fit it into whatever you're already doing. So that's really amazing. And I've just got our open mic section for you now. So here's where you can talk about genuinely anything you would like to. You can expand upon what we've been talking about or bring up anything new.
Tough one. I don't know. I think hopefully I've already covered a lot of the main points. I think we've been able to touch on a lot of the main things that I wanted to say about exercising efficiently. So I don't have too much more to add. But I guess just the main points are that any exercise is better than none. I think a lot of people just focusing on that consistency rather than what you're doing. It's just trying to find something that works and just try and do it regularly. I think every time that you show up for an exercise session, it's kind of like another vote for yourself that you are someone who is an exerciser.
Yeah.
So like if you think of it like that, like I think a lot of people, they don't see themselves as someone who's an exerciser. They just think, that's just not something I do. Maybe because they think their idea of exercise is a little bit skewed in a way. But I think it's just about, we just need to make it easier for people. And
100%.
The more guidelines and, programs that we're throwing at people and saying you got to do this, I just think it's getting in the way a little bit. So if I was to say, nothing else, it's just, we just need to keep it simple, keep it consistent. And I think if we can stick to that long term and just find ways to do that, I think that's when the benefits will come.
Yeah, amazing. And I think we have kept it pretty simple today and, given people so many options. So thank you for that. And that also brings us to the end of today's episode. So thank you so much for coming into the studio today. And it was really great chatting to you. And I'm sure everyone's been able to take some tips and tricks that they can use for the next time they exercise. I know I have. And for those of us who want to find out more about you, where can we go?
Sure. So trying to be a little bit more active on social media these days. So trying to share some positive messages about exercise just through Twitter and LinkedIn mainly.
Okay.
On Twitter, I'm at Jackson Fyfe. And then LinkedIn, you can jump on there and search me on there as well. So yeah, mainly active on those two social media platforms. If you're interested in some of my research, so just jumping onto my Deakin profile, or also have a Google Scholar profile as well, where there's some more of my research papers, some of which are open access, meaning they're openly accessible to the public without any subscription fees. So yeah, anywhere there, yeah.
Awesome. Well, we also have Jackson's details in the description below. So to everyone listening, please don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we'll see you guys next time. You have been listening to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website pp.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.